This James Talarico Ken Paxton situation is crazy, stupid. It's part of the reason I hate politics, but of course, we need to talk about it because you may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you. Because in Texas, there's a big Senate race. You have Talarico securing the Democratic Party nomination back in March, and then Paxton, the Trump-backed candidate, he clinched the Republican nomination in a runoff this week. And already, they've turned their sights on each other. They've come out swinging. Though Paxton and his supporters, they're seemingly grasping at straws. Throwing out things like the false claim that Talarico is vegan, trying to insult him and argue that he's not man enough to represent Texas. Whereas Talarico, he's honing in on the various criminal and corruption allegations that have dogged Paxton for years now. And so, for example, with Paxton and his victory speech, he slammed what he claimed were Talarico's extreme positions on gender, immigration, religion, and other issues. He also seemed to be kind of like peer reviewing various mocking nicknames.
Some people know him as Tofu Talarico. Some people call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I've even heard some people call him James Talarico. And others refer to him simply as Low T Talarico.
And actually with that last one, there was an attack ad that launched the next day that was labeled Talarico too low T for Texas. And you've kind of seen a lot of the right-wing voices kind of going all in on this meat and masculinity angle.
The reason why Democrats are failing is because they've given up on masculinity. They've given up on testosterone. They've given up entirely for effeminate, estrogenic, catty, and totally embarrassing candidates like Beto and Beta here. And most importantly, the American people know what leadership looks like. It looks like President Trump winning 119 out of 119, a 100% endorsement record. Donald Trump is winning across the board.
It is not this baby lotion soft child. He looks prepubescent. Yes. He looks like such a beta male. Beto O'Rourke was his big brother in the after school program.
They nominated someone more effeminate than Beto, and I can't wait for this race to get underway. Did you know that he looks prepubescent?
These are the notes you took?
Did you know that he looks like the guy that leaves an apple on the teacher's desk? That's this guy. Now, the major factor in this race, Greg, is whether Talarico's vegan.
And well, with all this, I think the Democrats just need to continue being on the attack with Paxton, right? Not play defense. That kind of just puts you on your back foot. And we are going to talk about all the easy things they can talk about with Paxton. I did also want to take a moment to talk about things like, as far as like where the vegan claim comes from. You did have Talarico claiming during his 2022 Texas House re-election bid that he was running a non-meat campaign because it was existential that we try to reduce our meat consumption. Apparently that was just for a period of time. Also, one of the other main attack angles is focused on Talarico's past comments advocating for transgender rights, including when he said that God is non-binary during a debate over legislation requiring students to play on K-12 sports teams matching their biological sex. And then where people were saying that he said that there were 6 biological sexes, you had Talarico referring to people with chromosomal variations during a committee debate over a similar bill. And so then also a big thing that popped up is that seemingly combining all of these attacks together, you had Trump advisor Stephen Miller writing on Twitter, the Democrats made history in Texas by nominating their first transgender Senate candidate, which then got a response from the official Democrats account that said, "Shut up, you ugly fuck." And actually with this, I do need to go on like a mini bubble rant. Okay, so understand this part is a little bit of op-ed. Following that tweet, you had kind of all the worst right-wingers that you've ever seen, right? Who have said the craziest shit for years, who have endorsed and supported a president who has said the craziest and threatening shit for years, all of a sudden clutching their pearls and going, oh my God, how horrible, how uncivil, how actually violent this message is. You had Stephen Miller's wife, Katie Miller, going on a Fox News to cry about it while then also at the same time trying to shame a woman who she said was responsible for the post, with then just a chunk of the internet responding that she actually looks like an attractive, fun, smart person. It turns out she's actually getting married. So also people started congratulating her for a number of reasons. Then you also had Katie Miller saying that liberal women, they have high rates of mental illness. They're just so sad, which you are probably not the best messenger for this. Katie, you literally fucked Stephen Miller on purpose. Like, you didn't lose a bet or anything. That is the craziest shit I've ever heard of. Talking about mental illness, you got me wanting to stop making this show right now and start marching in the street for healthcare for all so you can get the mental help you seem to need. But back to the news as far as Talarico. He firmly rejected the claim that he's vegan.
I'm not a vegan. I'm an 8th generation Texan. I've been eating barbecue since before Ken Paxton's first indictment. And this campaign basically runs on Texas barbecue. If all they have is lying about me being a vegan, I feel pretty good about our chances this November.
He then also responded to Paxton's Talarico label.
Well, I think if Ken Paxton is worried about freaks, he should stop giving Epstein-style sweetheart deals to pedophiles.
And that's actually a very big one. He is referring to the fact that Paxton's office offered a plea deal to a man charged with repeatedly sexually abusing a young boy that would have let him serve just 1 day in jail and avoid registering as a sex offender. And actually with that, Talarico really wanted to keep things in perspective when it comes to the seriousness of the criticisms either candidate's facing.
There are statements that I've made where I've missed the mark. I'll be the first to admit that. But Ken Paxton is intentionally clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption.
And actually with that, we should talk about Paxton's career, because while there is no objective measure to definitively label Paxton the most corrupt politician in America, Talarico's claims, they don't come out of nowhere. For example, going back to 2015, the same year that Paxton was sworn in as Attorney General, Paxton was indicted on charges including securities fraud. And according to the indictment, the actual crime took place back in 2011 when he was a state representative. Allegedly, Paxton pushed his friends and colleagues to invest in a tech startup while posing as an investor himself when he was actually being paid by the company. But his trial was then repeatedly delayed, with prosecutors claiming most holdups were caused by Paxton. And so he spent nearly a decade serving as the state's top law enforcement official despite facing those criminal charges, and even while federal authorities opened another investigation into several other potential corruption crimes committed while in office. And famously, in 2023, state representatives, including several Republicans, voted to impeach him on 20 charges. Charges that included misapplication of public resources, bribery, obstruction of justice, false statements in official records, conspiracy and attempted conspiracy, dereliction of duty, unfitness for office, and abuse of public trust. And many of those charges stemmed from his relationship with a real estate investor and wealthy donor whom Paxton allegedly helped and protected. And that's also his other charges centered on his retaliation against whistleblowers who reported his conduct. But then the Republican-dominated Senate acquitted Paxton, and less than a year later, 3 weeks away from a trial that could have handed him a life sentence, he ended up striking a deal to have the charges from 2015 dropped. And actually all he had to do in exchange was complete 100 hours of community service, take a 15-hour course on legal ethics, and pay roughly $300,000 in restitution. And for Paxton, $300,000 ain't much. Because despite living for more than 20 years on the relatively modest salary of a public official, he's gone from being a middle-class lawyer to a multimillionaire. And that's thanks to investments including into a local company that secured a lucrative state contract the year after he first entered office. An investment, by the way, he reportedly failed to disclose. But in any case, Paxton has maintained his innocence, calling the deal the conclusion of a decade-long political prosecution. His attorney emphasizing that the agreement hadn't been a plea bargain and didn't represent an admission of wrongdoing. Also in the final weeks of Biden's term, the DOJ ended its own corruption investigation, deciding against bringing charges, with many seeing that as them just knowing that Trump was coming in and was probably going to kill it. And so now, for more than a year, especially with Trump back in office, he's been a man kind of unencumbered by the threat of consequences for actions. And that's even though the scandals haven't fully gone away. But there are things like he's reportedly claimed that 3 houses are his primary residence, committing what the Trump administration has repeatedly claimed is a serious crime, but only when it accuses his enemies of doing it. And just last year, his wife of 38 years, she accused him of adultery and filed for divorce on what she said were biblical grounds. And so while this is still Texas, and I would personally say that Paxton is still the favorite in my eyes because there's a lot of runway from now till November. Whatever the truth of all the many allegations that Paxton has faced, even in a post-Trump America, you have many saying that is a lot of baggage to try to get into the Senate with. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing Dems kind of optimistic about this race, especially as the cash has been pouring in. Or just to give you an idea, Talarico's campaign reportedly raised more than $3 million in the first 24 hours after Paxton came out as the Republican opponent. That is the most money the campaign's raised in a single day, which is really saying something because they raised $2.5 million earlier this year, shortly after CBS decided not to air that interview with Talarico that he did with Stephen Colbert. And overall, Talarico raised $27 million in the first quarter of the year, which is one of the highest totals by a Senate candidate ever. Whereas Paxton's campaign and its committees took in $2.2 million over the same period. And so with all that, you had one GOP consultant telling NBC News that groups supporting Paxton are likely going to have to quadruple their original spending for the race to defend their majority in the Senate. And you have some worried that they're possibly going to drain resources from other key battlegrounds. But of course, there's a long road to November. It's too early for anyone really to get confident, and we're going to be here to see what happens.